Could you forgive the man who was responsible for your child's death?
Well, in August 2011, Nicola Simpson came face to face with the man who was driving the car which killed her 15-year-old daughter, Abigail.
Nicola hoped that by doing this she would get the answers to questions plaguing her since her daughter's death in 2007, and she joins us now. And thank you very much indeed for coming in today. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. So it's the 6th of October 2007, and Abigail's getting ready for a big night out on the town with her mates.
Yes, she was.
What sort of a day had you had?
Well, we just moved into a house the week beforehand, so I'd been busy decorating the kitchen and dining room. Abigail and Hannah, my other daughter, our younger sister, had in the utility room cleaning out the hamsters and things. They'd wanted these new pets I'd promised them they could have. And just a normal day-to-day, lots of laughter and fun. It was nice having our own home and getting ready for getting on with our lives in the place we wanted to be.
So at about 7 o'clock she went out.
She did. She went out with her
that was the last
friend.
time you spoke to her? What did she say? What was...
Well, I was actually in the utility room. I didn't see her. I was busy ironing material, covering a curtain blind. And she just called out, "Bye, Mum, see you later, I'm off," as a normal thing you'd do. And I was like, "See you later, have a nice time." And off she went.
So she went into town originally, wasn't she? And
Yeah.
there was this big group of them that would hang out together. And it was at this point that she was invited to go to a party.
She was, yes.
With some other friends, which was just slightly out of town.
Yes, about 6 miles.
So this is where Scott Manson comes into the story, because
Yes.
he'd recently passed his driving test and
3
he
days.
hadn't been drinking. 3 days he'd
3
passed
days
his test
earlier.
for. He hadn't been drinking, so he suggested that he would come and pick the girls up. Now there's two sort of key bits to this story, because one we've just covered is the fact that he'd only been driving for 3 days, and also that the car was overloaded actually.
Yeah, it was.
How many people were in the car?
There was 6, including the driver. There was one lad in the boot. So there was three girls in the back, 1 in the boot, and the front passenger and the driver.
And what do you know of what happened that night?
Excuse me.
My understanding is the party was going on in Castletown. They'd found Abigail, attractive young girl. They were all interested in getting her to come to the party along with her friends. And of course, what girl wouldn't be flattered and say yes? So off she went. Scott came along and picked her up. And one of our other friends, they went for a drive to Scrabster, not far from where we lived. Probably a bit of joyriding, enjoying the moment that he's just passed his test, from what I understand. Came back and picked one of Abigail's other friends up. I don't know at what point the other lads got in the boot of the car. So now the car was overloaded and they drove to Castletown. I understand that Scott overtook his friend, and that friend then overtook him later on that journey. And as they came into Castletown, Scott didn't slow down and took the bend probably too fast, lost control of his car and hit the wall. Abigail took full impact.
Oh my goodness me.
Well, the warrant of detention that Scott had caused the death of Abigail Simpson by driving dangerously at speeds in excess of the prevailing speed limits while carrying 5 passengers in a vehicle designed for 4. The vehicle had a broken front spring and had overtaken another car whilst unsafe to do so, losing control of the car and crashing it into a wall and a lamp post. She was so severely injured she died, and 2 others were also severely injured. And then, of course, you say that evening, you know, you felt something wasn't right.
Yeah, about 9:30 that evening, she was out. Something just didn't feel right for me. I thought something's wrong, she's not gonna... I didn't know what, I just didn't know what to feel, really. She just didn't...
Yeah, something wasn't right.
Yeah,
and then...
something wasn't quite right, so I started to phone her. She was due home at 11 o'clock. Abigail was always 10 minutes late. She was a typical teenager who tried to push my boundaries. She was very cheeky. I would do the same. So about 10 to 11 I started ringing her to say, please don't walk home. I thought maybe she's going to be mugged or raped or attacked or something horrible, but I never thought this.
And it was at 11:30 that the police arrived.
Yeah, it was just before then, about 11:20. Policeman knocked on the door.
That terrible knock on the door. When you didn't take in the word fatal, first of all.
No, I didn't understand what that meant.
And then they told you not to drive, and they told you not to go to the scene because she was still in the car.
She was.
At that stage, and they were terrified that you would go and see. You went to break it to your mother, and then this, I can't imagine this awful moment days later when you've got to go to Inverness and you've got to identify her.
Yeah.
And you say part of you
Something
died
no
at that
parent
moment.
should ever have to do.
No. And I drove 120 miles to go and identify her body. And it was awful. It's not something you ever want to see.
No, I'm sure.
18 months later, in June 2009, you had to go through the court case. You had to see Scott
Yes.
there. What was that like?
Awful. I didn't intend to go to court at all. For me, it doesn't bring Abigail back. She's never coming home. But it dawned on me that everybody who was there that night, who was in that car, they were there in the courtroom, and they were there as witnesses as well. And I thought, there's nobody there for Abigail. So I had to go for her. And I waited while the jurors were being selected, and I'm sitting not much further than I am from you, from Scott.
How did you feel about him at that time?
I hated him. I was really angry. This young lad was responsible for killing my baby, and there was nothing that was going to bring her back, and he's sitting here pleading not guilty. I was cross, I was angry, frustrated. I carried a box of tissues with him, and I didn't realise I had this little mountain sitting next to me where I'd been sobbing the whole way through.
Well, he was found guilty of causing death by dangerous driving and received a 2.5-year prison sentence in a juvenile detention centre, as well as a 7-year driving ban. Served 9 months there. This shattered your family because you lived in a small village, and you knew that people were looking at you thinking, oh, there's that poor lady who's just lost her daughter, and the way that you drove to work either took you past the cemetery where she was, or it took you past the crash site where it had all happened, and eventually too much. And you actually moved away. You moved to Cyprus, didn't you?
We did, yeah. We ran away to Cyprus.
And it was only when you came back on a family visit that an impulse overtook you, and you said, I'm going to see him. How long after the event was this?
This was August 2011, so a few years later.
So why did you want to do that? Because you've already said when you saw him in court that you hated him. And yet here you are, driving yourself to his front door to speak to him. What made you do it?
I had questions right from day one. I wanted to know what it was like for Abigail. What did she go through? Was she happy? Was she scared? Did she know what was happening? What was the last song that she had playing in the car? I was there at the beginning of her life. I gave birth to her. And I've been there for her, and I've been responsible her whole entire life. The minute she got in that car, she was Scott's responsibility. And I wasn't there. I wasn't there for the end, for the last part of her journey through her life. That last 15, 20 minutes or so, I wasn't around, and
You didn't know what sort of a reaction you were going to get when you knocked on the door?
No.
And you knocked on the door, and Scott's father answered?
He did.
And asked you to come in?
Yes.
And then Scott came downstairs?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Completely surreal. I remember sitting on the sofa in their living room before Scott walked down the stairs, and I looked out the window of my hire car and looked back at the room I'm in thinking, oh my God, I'm actually sitting in his living room. I'm about to meet Scott, and he'd killed my baby. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't, didn't want to hurt him. I'd gone through phases where I'd wanted to punch him and things like that, and other things much worse. But I needed answers, and I needed to know the things that have been playing on my mind the whole time. And I thought, if I don't go now, I'm not sure I ever will.
You spoke to him for 2 hours, didn't you?
About that, yes.
Did you get the answers that you went to
I
find?
did, yeah. The first thing he said to me was, I'm so sorry. I never ever meant for this to happen. I'm really sorry, as he cried and sat in the chair. And I think for me, that was probably one of the turning points. I heard his remorse, and I think that's what I needed to hear.
Well, actually, you came away feeling that you were pleased that he hadn't got a longer sentence, which originally, after the court case, you were upset about. But you came away feeling that actually there was no point in 2 people's lives being destroyed.
No. I actually wrote to the judge before the court case, because I wasn't intending on going, and I asked if he could have a shorter prison sentence. He's not some murderer or somebody horrible who did this on purpose. He didn't intend to kill my daughter. He didn't ask Abigail to get in the car and think, I'm going to do this to her and end her life and destroy everybody else's. He made a stupid mistake, and Abigail paid the highest price of her life. My family are all left suffering, her friends. Him and his family are left suffering. 2 families were destroyed that night. And yeah, I didn't feel that a 10-year prison sentence or more
would have helped anyone.
You say you did find out the song that they were listening to at the moment of the accident, but it's something you've never told anyone.
No,
you
I
kept
that
it just
for
myself.
you.
You didn't forgive him fully until you were writing it down.
Yes, when I was writing my book, my friend kept asking me to write my book, to write a story. I'm not a writer. I got an E in English at school. I liked maths. But my friend kept saying, why don't you write your book? Why don't you write a story to let other people know that what they're going through is normal? When people ask me, they tilt their head and they ask that question, how are you? I never said I'm fine. In fact, I often swore and would say how it really felt. I was suicidal, I didn't want to be here anymore, and people were quite taken back because I was honest about how I really felt. And she said, there's people out there that feel this way and they don't. They sit there and go, oh, I'm fine, I'm okay. Yeah. And I wouldn't say that.
So once you'd written it, then that was when you realised that you'd actually forgiven him?
Yes, I'd already started writing my book before I met Scott. While I was there, I actually asked him if I could use his own name in the story, and he said yes. He asked for a copy, which surprised me, actually. Cause
You've told him not to read it, though, haven't you?
I did tell him not to read it, because it would be so painful for him to see the after effects of what he did. But he has told me he'd like to read it. I know he hasn't yet. I've just spoken to him recently. But I have asked him to make me one promise. If he starts it, please finish it, because wherever he stops could be at a horrendous point when I'm at a point where I was wanting to torture him. It's all in my book. I've not held back. I've been honest.
How's Hannah?
She's okay. She's very quiet. She's a lot like her dad. Abigail was talkative like me, whereas Hannah's very quiet, keeps things to herself. And I think maybe her grieving's possibly just starting 5 years on.
Well, this is the story that we've been talking about. Abigail's Rainbow, a searing account of a bereaved mother's journey through agony to forgiveness. And as you said, hopefully, if there is someone who may have gone through something similar, then this might help.
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you've been affected by Nicola's story, then maybe you've lost someone in tragic circumstances, you can find details of helplines on our website.
Right, we're back after this break.